Even organizations pushing limited hangouts that UFOs are a national security threat are being purged on Wikipedia. Jared Isaacman's nomination for NASA administrator was pulled just as he was on the verge of being confirmed by the US Senate. President Trump dropped a truth bomb by reposting a claim that Joe Biden had been executed and cloned. John Brandenburg's book, Death on Mars, provides compelling evidence of a nuclear war on another planet using NASA data. Chris Bledsoe says NASA asked for his help to understand orbs that were harassing their astronauts. These stories and more on Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome to the June 7 edition of Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review. There are some very interesting stories that I want to go over with you this week. And I want to begin with this movie, The Gorge. I watched it on May 30, and it really struck me as being a good example of soft disclosure of super soldier programs dating back to the World War II era. It shows how the super soldiers were bioengineered by blending human genetics with animal and plant DNA. And what is very interesting is that The Gorge shows how the super soldier program was corporatized, with governments taking a back seat as corporations stepped in to run the programs in total secrecy. And it shows how these corporations operate with utter ruthlessness when it comes to handling their personnel and any kind of personnel issues that come up. And while the location is not revealed, what I think is really being disclosed here is that this is what is happening in Ukraine out of the underground bases there, involving biolabs that have been funded through the US. So I'm going to be talking more about that in my monthly briefing that is actually being held today, and I'll do an announcement at the end of this week in review. But definitely, if you want to kind of watch a deep dive into what is really happening in Ukraine and how the Gorge is soft disclosure, then come to the the monthly briefing today. Okay, so here's something that I thought was very interesting. That is a tweet or an ex-post from the Disclosure Party that said that the Wikipedia page for the UFO think tank at Sol Foundation has been deleted, while the pages for skeptical organizations remain unaltered and are linked as primary sources for the UFO page. So Wikipedia is purging even kind of think tanks that are funded by kind of major organizations. The Sol Foundation has a lot of very credible people on it in terms of background, credentials, working in academia, working in industry, or former government officials, lots of PhDs and so forth. And they've been able to raise a significant amount of money to fund their UFO research. But Wikipedia is deleting many UFO organizations, including the Sol Foundation. So even organizations pushing what I consider to be a limited hangout, that UFOs are a national security threat, are being purged. So the deep state, I think, is trying to put the UFO genie back in the bottle after former officials, servicemen, etc., were allowed to come forward to talk about UFO crash retrievals involving non-human intelligence. So if we go back to the 2023 US congressional hearing where David Grush came forward talking about knowing of up to 40 individuals companies that were involved in UFO crash retrieval programs involving non-human intelligence. The genie was really let out of the bottle there, with Grush coming forward and the US Congress kind of stepping in. And soon after that, you have the proposed UAP Disclosure Act. All of that is starting to be wound back. And why that is happening, well, I'll give you an explanation a little bit later in this Week in Review. Jared Isaacman's nomination for NASA administrator was pulled just as he was on the verge of being confirmed by the US Senate. Isaacman disagreed with Elon Musk about prioritizing Mars for future NASA missions, and instead wanted to focus on returning to the moon. Now, this is still speculation at this point, because we don't know for sure why it was that Isaacman was basically his nomination withdrawn. Some say it was because he was very close with Elon Musk, and that this was something that President Trump didn't want as a new administrator was appointed. But I suspect it was because of this kind of winding back. I mentioned the Wikipedia purging UFO researchers. I think that Isaacman's focus on the moon for moon missions under the Artemis program, that this is something that the deep state wants to cancel. They don't want humans to go back to the moon. They don't want manned missions to the moon, because the moon has too many secrets that would be revealed in a short time. So what I think is going on is that they prefer to just kind of give Elon Musk the kind of opportunity to go to Mars, get the public hyped up about colonization of Mars, because that's going to take a good 10 years, close to 10 years, to really establish colonies on Mars using the Starship reusable rockets that SpaceX has. So we're talking 2030s when there would be colonies on Mars, and when you would actually have colonists finding evidence of ancient life there. But if you had colonies or bases on the moon, which could be set up in a much quicker time, much shorter time, then the secret would be kind of let out that extraterrestrials have been on the moon. And so I think from there you would have disclosure happening pretty quickly. So I think this is why Isaacman was really let go, because he wanted to focus on returning to the moon and not Mars, whereas I think Donald Trump got the push or the command that no, cut out the moon missions. We don't want humans to go back to the moon, manned missions to the moon, just Mars, focus on Mars. So I think that's what's happened. Okay, so here is President Trump dropping a truth bomb. This is something that's very interesting on his Truth Social. So on his Truth Social, Donald Trump posted or reposted a comment by this user, this truth user, LIIIJH, whatever that means. And this user said, "There is no Joe Biden. Executed in 2020, Biden clones, doubles, and robotic engineered soulless, mindless entities are what you see. Democrats don't know the difference." Okay, so this is a genuine post from Donald Trump on his Truth Social, where he was reposting this comment. And this is a truth bomb, because he's talking about, Biden being cloned, that what people were seeing during the Biden presidency was not the original Joe Biden who was executed in 2020, but they were seeing clones, doubles, robotic engineered soulless, mindless entities. Now, does that mean Trump agreed with all of this? I don't think just because he reposted it that he would agree with everything, but I think there were elements in here that he probably knew to be the truth. Now, what would be the truth? Well, I think the use of doubles definitely was going on. Clones, definitely the clones, they were used. And so I'll be doing a deep dive into this post in my monthly briefing. So if you want to know more about the history of cloning and robotic engineered soulless entities, where they came from, when they started to use these to replace political leaders. Joe Biden was by no means the first. In 2020, this had been going on since the 1970s. So in my monthly briefing, I'll give you more details into who was the first to spill the beans on this process. But definitely a remarkable retruthing by President Trump. Here's an interview I did with Brad Johnson. And not to be confused with Brad Olson, as some people say, have been confusing him. Brad Johnson is someone that has been working since 2008 on communicating with a couple of different entities, and his communication is done through channeling, but he's not a let's just say armchair channeler. He is someone that's put a lot of thought into it. He has set up a protocol for how to make sure that the entity that you're tuning into on the other side is actually who it is. Now, this has been done for a long, long time. In my view, some of the best channelers have given us really accurate information about extraterrestrial life. We could go to the Ra material that was channeled by Carla Ruckert in the 1980s. You could go before that. You can go to The Only Planet of Choice that was channeled by Phyllis Schlemmer in the 1970s. And before that, you had Jane Roberts channeling the Seth material. And in all of these cases, these were people who put a lot of thought into making sure that the entities that they were connecting with through their channeling, through their telepathic communications, were genuinely positive, benevolent beings. And so Brad Johnson, he's developed his own method for making sure that the beings that he is in touch with, primarily a Syrian being that he has been working with since 2008 called Adronis, and also a inner earth being called Athena. Now, I believe he's communicated with a few others, but these are the two main beings that he communicates with. And that's actually very helpful, because you can feel the signature, the energy vibration of a signature of an entity that you're communicating with. And this has happened to me. I've been involved with communications. Very interestingly, Elena Denan, who I've worked with for a few years, but unfortunately at the moment we are not really collaborating very much, which is unfortunate. But I remember when Elena was communicating with Thorhan, I was in her presence. I would feel Thorhan's energy signature, and that later on when Elena would communicate something to me about Thorhan, I would feel his energy signature, and I truly felt that he was truly a wonderful being, and that we are connected, and that's very, very interesting. So I think this is what all good channels do, that they establish some kind of empathic, telepathic link with the beings, and that way that enables them to communicate with those beings. So in our first Exopolitics Today interview, Brad went over quite a few issues, such as 12-strand DNA. He thinks that this is something that only few individuals have attained that, and these are very advanced spiritual entities such as Babaji, that was mentioned in Autobiography of a Yogi. But that when it comes to most of the extraterrestrials that are visiting us, they have around 3 to 4 strand DNA. Very interesting that Brad also got information, and he says you can take this to the bank, that Canada, Greenland, and Mexico are destined to join the US in a North American Union over the next decade, and that this will be something where the US Constitution continues to be the law of the land, that it's not going to be just kind of like jettisoned for some trade agreement between these entities. The US Constitution will continue to be in place, and that places like Canada and Greenland will come in as territories and states, and Mexico, I'm not sure if that'll be incorporated into the US as a number of states, but what Brad mentioned was some kind of special protocol agreement. So very, very interesting, the information he's been getting. And he also thinks that the plans for a fake alien invasion, well, this is the information he's received, that these plans for a fake alien invasion or a salvation event, that they were real plans, but they've been overtaken by humanity's steady and gradual awakening to the truth. So that's some positive information right there. Okay, so here we have, I thought it was a very strange article by Dr. Avi Lo. And Dr. Avi Lo wrote an article on the Medium, Would We Notice a Nuclear War on an Exoplanet? And what he does here is that he refers to a book titled Nuclear War, a Scenario by Annie Jacobson, where, this book is really speculative, talking about how you would be able to detect nuclear explosions in distant exoplanets, that there would be a way that you could look for those signatures using the James Webb Space Telescope, and so he spent, his article was really focused on that, and I thought it was very, very strange, because Avi Lo is a scientist that prides himself on the scientific method and using empirical data, but he seems to be unfamiliar with some very basic literature when it comes to the UFO phenomenon. I was astounded that he didn't seem to be aware of, or maybe he ignored, Dr. John Brandenburg's book, Death on Mars, The Discovery of a Planetary Nuclear Massacre. I mean, if you're looking for evidence of nuclear wars on planets other than Earth, you don't have to look at an exoplanet and come up with a very elaborate kind of method for detecting such an event in a distant exoplanet using telescopes like the James Webb. That you could just use NASA data that found isotopes, I think it was xenon-119, something like that, that was found on Mars where it shouldn't be, and that is a telltale sign of nuclear war. So Death on Mars, this is a book that Dr. John Brandenburg wrote, that provides compelling evidence of a nuclear war on another planet. And so, why didn't Avi Lo mention this? That kind of really mystifies me. It may be because John Brandenburg is kind of shunned by the NASA community, shunned by mainstream scientists who thinks because Dr. Brandenburg, he believes that extraterrestrials are visiting us. So he's someone who has information that goes against the grain of what NASA and scientists like Avi Lo want to make mainstream, or want to kind of like discuss in their mainstream articles and interviews and so forth. So they're kind of like shunning Dr. John Brandenburg. But I think in doing so, they really make themselves look to be quite ignorant, because, how can you talk about nuclear wars on other planets and not discuss evidence from NASA that, and based on the discovery of these isotopes that are not naturally occurring, that were found on Mars in places where they shouldn't be, which are a telltale sign of nuclear war on Mars. Now, John Brandenburg, he believes that these wars happened in ancient times. I think there's data that actually that you can actually look to what happened on Mars with German colonization by the Dark Fleet in the 1950s with the aid of the US in terms of the use of nuclear weapons. But Dr. Brandenburg, he's a much better scientist than I am, and so he's just going by the data rather than, I tend to just focus on whistleblower testimonies. Okay, so here is a citation, a point raised by Jason Wild, who goes into detail about the moon not always being in our orbit, that the moon was brought here. It's a recent arrival. And he references ancient cultures. Remember a time before it existed. Myths call it a cosmic intruder. And when you step away from the nice little lies of mainstream science, the moon stands out as a massive, unnatural object that simply doesn't belong. It's too perfect, too precise, and too weird. The idea that it's been there forever is a modern assumption, not a fact. And this was something that was first raised in a book by Emanuel Velikovsky. I believe it was Worlds in Collision, where he talked about the evidence that the moon is a recent arrival. And he cited, as Wilder does here, the ancient Greeks called the Akkadians proselyons, and they referred to the, quote, the people before the moon. And the Zulu people say 2 sky beings brought the moon here. And you have Andean legends. Remember a time when the earth had no seasons, no floods, no moon, just harmony. And Jason Wild goes on to say, I believe that these are the fragmented memories of a planetary reset. And what followed? Chaos, tides, seasons, floods, human biology synced up with the moon's cycle. And so I believe that's absolutely correct, that approximately 13,000 years ago, I think, or 12,000 years ago, during the end of the Younger Dryas period, you had massive flooding all over the planet. Atlantis was destroyed and sank under the ocean due to the earth changes. And that I think that this is when the moon was brought into our orbit as an outpost for studying our planet. So why is this important? Well, I think it's important because if the moon is a recent arrival, if it is actually a kind of like a mothership, a planet, a moon-sized refugee ship for people to be moved, and that it has within it ancient structures that were built by different extraterrestrials, then that's something that could be discovered if we have moon missions. But what I've already mentioned is that President Trump has decided to support Elon Musk's plan to bypass the moon and instead send manned missions to Mars. The Artemis program is originally conceived, called for the first moon base and to use that as a jumping off point for Mars. So originally under the Artemis program, 2024, you would have had moon landings and the establishment of a base there. That's all been wound back. And the Artemis program, it may not go ahead at all in terms of a moon landing, and everything's going to be focused on returning to Mars and supporting Elon Musk's SpaceX for future Mars missions. And that this is something that I think President Trump supports because he's being told to by the deep state. And again, this is one of those things that I'll be talking about in my monthly briefing. Why is it that Trump is supporting manned missions to Mars rather than the moon? and what that means in terms of extraterrestrial disclosure. Because effectively now, with the postponement of these moon missions, and really I think they're going to be abandoned altogether, manned missions to the moon from the US are not going to happen. And whether other countries are allowed to do it, that's going to be the big question, whether China, India can go back to the moon. Russia, I doubt they will, because they haven't been sending moon missions. Well, let's just say that in the 1970s was when they did their last successful moon mission, and they haven't been back since. So someone warned them off the moon, and I think that is going to continue on. All right, so here is an article I did that really set off a firestorm on the internet. The ET disclosure betrayal, Galactic Federation of Worlds agreements with global elites, and that's available on multiple platforms, including Patreon, where it was first released. And again, just a shout out to all my Patreon subscribers. Really appreciate your support. And you get to see these articles or see my commentaries and interviews before everyone else does. And then they're made available for free on YouTube, Rumble, and Spotify, and so forth. So the bottom line here is that someone, Dr. Andrea Martin, who has worked at a Worcester University for 19 years teaching a number of classes, she says that she's in communication with a extraterrestrial from the Pleiades that in a previous life she was married to, and that they both agreed to come to the Earth as part of the Envoy program. She came as a walk-in, and she says she remembered that at the age of 2 or 3 when she was taken up physically onto the starship, where she was told who she was and how she had arrived here on Earth, and that her husband in the Pleiades, Ika, that he is part of the Galactic Federation of Worlds, and that he's part of this extraterrestrial contingent, these Nordics that are working with the US Air Force. And in my article, I mentioned JP and how he has, on a number of occasions, encountered these Nordics in kind of Air Force uniforms with distinctive patches and crew cuts, and that they are doing all sorts of things to collaborate with the Air Force. So Ika, according to Dr. Martin, is part of that extraterrestrial contingent, and he's currently stationed at Cheyenne Mountain. And she says that what happened was that, and I wrote an article about this, and I don't want to read the article out because that's really what I did in my commentary. But the article really says that the Galactic Federation of Worlds has reached agreements with global elites comprising leaders from mega corporations and military forces that cooperated in ousting humanity's former overlords, the Draconian Empire and the Orion Collective. With their joint success over this former galactic threat, agreements have now been reached between the Galactic Federation of Worlds and human leaders to slow walk genuine UFO disclosure, that is extraterrestrial disclosure, thereby perpetuating humanity's suffering, according to disturbing information recently received by Dr. Andrea Martin. So here I am as a journalist, investigative journalist, trying to understand, is this true or not? Now, so far, I think Andrea Martin, I mean, she's got solid credentials. Her story is internally consistent. She's been doing this for a few years now. And she remembers things from the time, going all the way back to when she was 2 to 3 years old, and then being picked up by the military-industrial complex and corporations such as Raytheon, and they wanted to weaponize her telepathic abilities, and she was subjected to my labs, where as a 16-year-old she was taken up and physically abused. And for a woman, everyone knows what that is. And this is the thing you have to ask yourself. Why would anyone come forward and say that, they were physically abused on these, as a teenager on these programs? That's not the sort of thing people are going to come forward and just say because, they want to attract the following. I mean, it is something that, for example, really made me very sympathetic to the story of Tony Rodriguez when he came forward and started to tell me about the physical abuse he suffered as a child in these programs. This is not the sort of thing people voluntarily want to share. It's like you do that because you feel compelled to tell the truth. So anyway, I feel that Andrea Martin is telling the truth as best as she can based on experiences she has had and her belief system. Now, and here's, I think, the critical test for any person, whether it's a contactee, whether it's a channeler, whether it's a researcher. Are their claims correlating in some way with real life events? And I believe what Dr. Martin's information here concerning the betrayal by the Galactic Federation of Worlds leaders does match events that are happening in real time. And I briefly discussed that in the article and in my commentary in terms of the slow walking of UFO disclosure that, and I've already mentioned Wikipedia purging these stories, organizations such as the Soul Foundation. I already mentioned the NASA administrator his nomination being purged because he wanted to return to the moon and so forth. So there are a number of events that match this. And more recently, we had the fallout between Donald Trump and between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And I think that is a reflection of this kind of Galactic Federation of Worlds betrayal, where their leadership made deals where they're going to slow walk the disclosure process. Now, in my article and commentary, I say this is not totally bad news because contact is still going to happen. But rather than official disclosure, what we're going to have is an organic disclosure process. So again, my monthly briefing, I'll talk a lot more about the falling out between Musk and Trump and how that pertains to this Galactic Federation disclosure. So, bottom line, I think this information is accurate as best as I can tell from my efforts to confirm this. And so we will talk more about this shortly. Okay, so JP has publicly released a photo of himself when he was 2 years old. And JP, for those that don't know, he served in the US Army for 4 years and has disclosed dozens of classified missions to outer space, to the inner Earth, and even other dimensions. So JP is going to be revealing himself, and this process is going to be happening probably within a few weeks, if not days. I mean, this is something that I think is going to be happening very, very soon. But more about that, and I'll have JP on Exopolitics today, hopefully doing the big reveal. So that will be announced as that is about to happen. Okay, here is a episode from the Y Files that focuses on evidence of planet Maldek, its destruction and how that impacted Mars, which orbited Maldek at the time, and how the debris affected the outer planets. The episode discussed Dr. Thomas Van Flanden's exploded planet hypothesis, Richard Hoagland's face on Mars hypothesis, and how both hypotheses were first proposed in a 1958 comic book, which was influenced by German scientist Werner von Braun and Willy Ley. I misspelt Werner. There's a H in there after the N. So this is what was discussed in the Y files, and I think AJ did a great job in presenting the evidence in a very compelling way, and that, in fact, I think there was a planet called Maldek that orbited roughly where the asteroid field is. Now, this information that AJ provided about the comic book series, this is something that I thought was very, very interesting, because it kind of matches, and this is my observation, that Werner von Braun and Willy Ley were involved in a secret German dark fleet, the Nachtwaffen, that had established bases on Mars and Ceres in the 1950s and later, and that at some point they learned the true history of our solar system, so that this German dark fleet, going back to Antarctica and how that was created by the German secret societies, and they built that out, and they had agreements with Draco reptilians, and that the Germans learned about the true history of our solar system from the Draco, and the Draco probably told them that yeah, there was a planet there, Maldek, but we blew it up when those uppity Maldekians didn't follow our commands. So let that be a lesson to you, humans. We'll blow up your effing planet if you don't listen to us. Something like that. So anyway, so Werner von Braun and Willy Ley, they knew about this startling history, because the Draco, I think that they wanted us to know that, yeah, planet Maldek was destroyed, and that the Draco probably had a hand in it. And so, yeah, stay in line, you humans. All right. So I think that's how the Germans learned about it, and that because Thomas van Flandern and Richard Hoagland, they developed their hypothesis using scientific data from NASA missions and so forth. I doubt that they probably even read the comic book series, but nevertheless, I think it's a fascinating history, and that Maldek was a super Earth in the asteroid belt at the time, and it was destroyed in some cataclysmic war that severely impacted Mars and affected the planets in the outer orbital regions, such as Neptune and Pluto and so forth. Okay, this was a very interesting truth from Vicky Verma. He says that this man, and here he's talking about Chris Bledsoe, who is a contactee who importantly has taken photographs of the craft that he has been interacting with, or more correctly, orbs. And I think that's worth emphasizing. So Chris Bledsoe says that NASA asked for his help to understand orbs that were harassing their astronauts. He said these are angelic beings that come out of orbs and can be as tall as 125 feet with wings and even smile at the astronauts. Okay, wow, that's quite an admission from Chris Bledsoe there, that NASA asked for his help because they wanted to understand orbs that were harassing their astronauts. Well, there's a couple of things here. Firstly, yeah, this is consistent with info from a couple of different sources that I'm familiar with. One, of course, is JP, who I just mentioned, and he has had experiences where he has encountered these orbs that are transportation devices used by different extraterrestrial beings, or even more powerful intelligences such as angels that were reported. Now, I can't remember the exact year, but about a decade or more ago, Russian cosmonauts described encountering these angelic beings in space, and that this truly shocked them. during their space missions, that these angels were able to come on board their I guess, Salyut spacecraft. I can't remember if it was a Salyut or one of the other Soviet missions, but the Soviet actually, I think, and the Soviets did have a space station up there. Now, so whether this was on the Soviet space station, I think that was called Salyut, or whether it was on the International Space Station, Soviet cosmonauts have reported seeing these angelic beings, and they definitely had problems, psychological problems as a result of that, because obviously a lot of these astronauts are not prepared psychologically to encounter extraterrestrial entities, let alone 15-foot or 125-foot angels out there. All right, here is my penultimate story that I want to share, and this is a post on the Global Intel Hub that discusses the article and the commentary I put out on the Galactic Federation of Worlds Disclosure Betrayal. And what I was very interested in was the way in which Global Intel Hub was able to corroborate this information by matching it up with events that are happening around us, including the falling out between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Now, I am going to be discussing this, as I said, in depth in my monthly briefing later on today. But this article also discusses that, and so we kind of like. What is that? All right, great minds think alike. I mean, the old saying that you look at people's information, such as Dr. Andrea Martin's information about the Galactic Federation making deals with the power elite, the deep state, and the deals are that disclosure is not going to happen. And then you look at these real-world events like Musk and Trump having a falling out pretty much at the exact same time. Why did they have the falling out? Well, you can take a look at this article, and then I hope you register for my monthly briefing, which is going to be on today, 2 o'clock East Coast time, 11 o'clock West Coast time, and I believe that's going to be 7 p.m. in Greenwich Mean Time. So, my monthly live briefing, that is something you get as part of your Patreon membership. If you're a Tier 2 member, that costs $18 a month, which I think is very reasonable, because you get on top of you get to support me in doing these weekly commentaries and interviews and weekend reviews, which is all free. You get all that for $7, and you get that in advance. And in addition, if you pay an extra, if you join at the $18 level, you get the monthly live briefing for free. So, but you don't have to become a Patreon subscriber if you just want to attend the monthly live briefing. You can also just join through Crowdcast, and then you will pay through Crowdcast, or you could even do it through PayPal if you wish to do it that way. So you have a number of options there. Just go to my website if you want to register through these other methods. But definitely, I appreciate your support. These webinars is how I survive, is how I'm able to pay all my bills, pay my videographer, and definitely how I can continue to put out a lot of free stuff. The interviews, the commentaries, the weekend reviews, all for free. And that's because of people like you who support me by becoming a Patreon subscriber or registering for my webinars. So I really appreciate you for your support, because that makes this Exopolitics work something that I can continue to do, and it puts food on the table and pays for all the bills. So I want to thank you for that, and I look forward to seeing you later on today for those that are going to do the monthly briefing. And if not, then I look forward to seeing you next week for my week in review. Aloha.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.